Welcome back everyone to another one of my PowerBox series of videos. In this particular video we're going to be covering off accessing a receiver menu within the PowerBox system once it's bound to a radio. There's a few people that have a little bit of trouble accessing this menu because they're not 100% sure how they access it. So we're going to show you two ways of accessing the receiver menu. So at the moment I do have a receiver bound to this core transmitter, and it's just a standard 9-channel PBR 9D receiver. Okay, so you got the receiver bound. How do we access the receiver menu? Basically we go into the main receiver menu, which is identified by the little receiver icon here. So you just click on that, and you'll notice this is basically the binding screen where you can do a range test, add and remove receivers. You'll notice the PBR 9D icon is shown here. You just click on the actual receiver itself, wait a few seconds, and bingo, we're in the receiver menu. So all these parameters on these following screens are all stored within the receiver itself. We have the firmware version, we have a frame rate setting, so we can change the frame rate for the PWM ports, in other words the servo ports. This particular receiver supports 12 milliseconds, 15, 18 and 21. Just bump the radio there. 21 is usually handy for your old analog servos. If you've got digital servos, there's no dramas usually using the faster 12 millisecond option. You have a data output port, and this can normally be set to, say, for instance, a PWM, S-Bus, SRXL 16 configuration. What else do we have here? Fast track, which is usually the default configuration. P2 bus out, I think that's the last one in that screen. So there's a few options there. So typically in one of my helis I have a Mikado V-bar controller which accepts S-Bus input. So I could use this receiver, set the data out to S-Bus, connect it with a single servo cable, and I have S-Bus going straight into my Mikado V-bar controller. Generally, if you're using a straight PowerBox system, you might be using an iGyro SAT or a GPS or a combination of the two. You would normally set that port to fast track. The output A start variable here, this pertains to the first PWM port or the first servo port on the receiver. Normally with most receivers, they start at channel 1. However, we can change this and you can basically set any channel you like here. So for instance, if we have two receivers on the aircraft and you might want the first receiver to say handles channels 1 through to 9, you can use the default setting of channel 1. So port number 1 will be channel 1, port number 2 will be channel 2 through to 9. And then the second receiver we can basically set it at, say, starting at channel 10. So therefore the second receiver will have its port starting at channels 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 and so on. If you have three receivers, then might want to increase the start channel. I'll just change that back to channel 1 quickly. There we go. A reset gyro option is for when you have a gyro connected to the receiver. So pretty much all the receivers featuring a fast track data output, you can hook up an iGyro SAT, which is their small miniature iGyro, and basically the receiver then becomes a stabilized receiver. The following menus all pertain to the gyro settings. So if we hit next, so I don't have a gyro connected to this receiver at the moment, but the settings are in there. There's basically the axis selection. So if you have a 3-axis gyro, you might have, say, your aileron, rudder and elevator as individual axes. There's a range selection. Basically that's based two modes of, it's a bit like having a flight mode on the gyro. So you have two individual settings, an A and a B setting, which you can select from a switch on your transmitter or from a stick switch or whatever you like. Obviously we've got gain, we've got things like attitude assist. So attitude assist is basically heading hold, a little bit different to your standard heading hold, but it is a heading hold parameter that we can set up on the gyro. Then you have other variables such as characteristics, stick priority, lock fill. You can read about those in the manual. Okay, following menu, there's an airspeed factor you can set on the gyro. So when you have a GPS connected, you set the gyro gain up to say your maximum gyro gain, which says, for instance, is say 30%, and then you take off, and as the speed increases, the gyro will automatically reduce its gain depending on this factor. So basically in a high speed situation, you don't really necessarily want the same gain, otherwise you can get oscillation of the flight surfaces. So, you fly a couple of 100 kilometers an hour in your jet, the gyro might reduce down to a particular gain setting. But however, when you come in for a landing, the gyro will then increase. As you slow down, the gain will increase back to the default setting you set. Here we do the input mapping. So basically all your flight surfaces are set up here. So you select the channels that your aileron elevators are controlled by. And there's also the last one here, channel gain. So this particular one here, you can set a channel, and this becomes your gain channel for the gyro. So for instance, you might have a rotary knob set up on your radio, and you can adjust the gain, and that rotary knob says working off, say, channel 5. You would type in channel 5 here, and that knob would then now adjust the gain of your gyro. Simple as that. And this last screen here is where we teach the gyro. Well, the system has to know which way the gyro is pointing, and also the stick endpoints. So you do that through this particular menu. Okay, and that's back to the original screen. So I'll just exit the screen now, and actually if I go straight to the home menu. So, like I showed before, one of the ways to access the menu is go to the receiver option, click on the receiver, and we're in the menu. There's a second way of accessing the menu. So I'll go back to the home screen. Let's add another telemetry screen to this transmitter, just so to keep things a little bit clearer. We're going to add a telemetry widget specifically for this receiver. So you'll notice here I've got the core, so there's all these telemetry parameters we can set up on the screen. But in this case, we want to set up a telemetry option or a variable for the receiver. So you notice here we've got the PBR 9D in slot A. So what have we got? We've got a choice of monitoring the battery or the power supply going to the receiver, lost frames, RSSI 1 and 2 for the individual antennas, or the individual receivers actually, because the 9D actually has 2 receivers in the one box. You also have a link quality indication for 1 and 2, receivers 1 and 2, and then you have a total link quality indication. You also have an external receiver error status and a status box. So the external receiver error variable is when you're using a satellite receiver with this particular receiver. Let's choose V battery to keep it simple. Okay, so this would be the normal menu. You can set up alarms and whatever through here. I won't bother going through it in this particular video. We click on OK, and you'll notice we've got the little widget here. Just as a bit of a show and tell for a lot of people. We can change the size of the widget by clicking the small, medium or large box. So now we've got a slightly larger widget with slightly larger text. So once you've got a receiver widget, now it doesn't have to be a battery, it can be any one of the receiver widgets. You can also access the receiver menu simply by holding your finger or my stylus on the screen, and you'll notice the widget is wiggling now. So while it's wiggling, it'll wiggle for a few seconds, and if I leave it long enough, I think it stops. There you go. Let's try it again. Just touch and hold. Notice it wobbling or wiggling. Once it's doing that, you just click on it again, and it takes you straight to this menu. We can now click the little menu icon here, and again, that takes us through to the receiver menu. So that's just a quick and easy way of accessing the receiver menu, especially if you're out in the field flying. It's just a few less button touches or whatever you like, screen touches or whatever. And there you go. That's about it. And hopefully you enjoyed this particular video, and we'll cover off some more programming examples at some later stage. At the moment, I'm just trying to cover off some of the simple things people get hung up on. There you go. Thanks very much for watching.